Welcome everybody to the first episode of the 2024 Goff Rugby Report draft shows, pre-draft shows for the Major League Rugby Draft. This is one of the times when I step my toe into Major League Rugby world, talking about the collegiate players. And this is really a show for young players who want to know what's going on in the draft, want to have a look at the players, and then we talk about decision making and in terms of what the teams are thinking about, and also about just sort of what teams value when they look at players. I'm going to draw a lot from my just amazing time with the MLR Rising guys at Mary Washington in July. Embedded with them, learned a lot from them, but also from the coaches watching them and everything like that, and then just watching the players in general. This first episode, as is often the case, it doesn't talk specifically about players, but is really more of sort of an advice thing. Now, in previous years, I've talked a lot about highlight videos and scouting videos and what kind of videos you can make. This year I'm not going to talk about that because very, very few players actually made videos, not in the same way that they made them previously. There are some actually pretty good ones. I'm going to highlight one player a little bit later in the series for his very good video because I just thought it was done well. But for the most part, my message had always been show full games. That's what people want to see. That's what scouts want to see. We do want to talk a little bit about sort of adjustments in the draft. Now, one of the big things that's come out in the last few years is the homegrown talent carve-out for MLR teams. So they can tag 5 players a year to say this is a homegrown player. We want to retain rights to this player. Usually there are rules about how much time they spend on an academy team or some kind of development team that the Major League Rugby team runs, okay? But there's a deadline to that. There's a yearly deadline, but also once that player has achieved, has gone through collegiate eligibility, or is basically at a time where they should be drafted, and they're not signed by the end of the season, they can enter the draft, basically, is what happens. But it's a way to sort of say, you can get around the draft. This player is not eligible for the draft because we've tagged them as a homegrown player. The funny thing is, of course, there are two funny things. Number one, what if the player doesn't want to be a homegrown player? It's like, I grew up in this town, I went to high school in this town, I even went to college like 30 minutes away. I'd like to go to the other coast. So this is going to come up a lot in these videos. Teams and players have to talk, and that's a dodgy thing because there are rules about negotiating contracts, but I think even so you have to be able to discuss with a team to say, look, I know you want me to be a homegrown player, but I have my girlfriend's just got a job in Boston, I want to go to New England. New England as in the region, not New England like the team, because you can't just automatically walk onto a championship MLR team and say, put me in the lineup. But the other thing that has changed about this that's worth noting is the development of Anthem in North Carolina. Now, the Anthem team is run by and for USA Rugby. It's funded by USA Rugby and also World Rugby, high performance money. Now, while every team has to be able to stand up and say, hey, we've got an academy team, Anthem didn't have time to set up an academy team, but you could argue that the USA Under-18, the USA Under-20 team is the academy team. MLR doesn't want that. They don't want Anthem to be able to say, all those players are ours, right? Can't do that, right? So there's, and even if it's not all those players, just like 5 players, just say, hey, those 3 players here from this region, like San Diego, you don't get them, we get them. So there has to be some discussion about that, and I think that's being worked out, and it'll be straightened out a little bit. But as we'll see going forward, there is a big attraction for a USA-based player to go to North Carolina and be part of the Anthem setup. Another big attraction is if you're a young player and you're talking about this and you're looking at this and thinking about the future. Next Phase Rugby can help you get settled in the right college for you. Download the app, nextphaserugby.com. You then get to scroll through and find information about profiles of college rugby programs. You get to, through the premium membership, which you get a discount off. There's a code at the bottom that will tell you about the discount code. And create a profile of your own to say, hey, recruit me and here's why. All of these things, it's enormously useful for young rugby players. Also, Irish Rugby Tours. Hey, don't forget, the tour is a beautiful way to experience the global nature of this game. So go to irishrugbytours.com to tour anywhere in the world. And Panther Rugby Academy. If you're looking to play at higher level, elite level games and get some more rugby at a higher level for you, from under 14 up to like under 23s, Panther Rugby Academy is a great way to do that. And finally, the US Rugby Foundation. You want to support grassroots rugby. You want to support the growth of the game, either in the youth level, in the high school level, scholarships. Go to usrugbyfoundation.org and support them. Please do support them. That's a great way to support the game in general. One of the other things I talk about a lot in this, and I'm going to talk about it again, is if you go through the draft process and you're not drafted, you're now a free agent. How great is that? You're an undrafted free agent. That affords you the ability to choose where you want to live. And considering that Major League Rugby, for the most part, doesn't pay a lot, if you're a number one pick, you might be able to get yourself set up fairly well. But if it's the difference between being the 36th pick and being undrafted free agent, you're better off being an undrafted free agent. Go to the city you want, set yourself up with a job, things like that. Now, this speaks also to what USA head coach Scott Lawrence told the MLR Rising players, which was more about the idea that don't expect to get drafted, but you have to expect to play rugby.
You need to play rugby this fall. Okay, you need to get more games in you to prepare you for your first season if you end up in Major League Rugby. Okay, there are lots of competitions. The one I'd encourage you guys to look at is called the ARP. A lot of clubs up and down the East Coast that are taking in professional players, Americans who need minutes, guys preparing to go into the MLR and getting competitive games. You can get 6 to 8 games in there. So I would say play rugby is the most important thing.
So yes, there are opportunities for players to play, and the Atlantic Rugby Premiership, the ARP, that's the big one. It's not the only one. West Coast, we've got one. Midwest, we've got one. But the ARP, which is, let's see if I remember right, Life, University, Charlotte Rugby Club, Mystic River, White Plains, New York Old Blue, Nyack, NOLA Academy. They all have their different things. Some of them are directly connected with MLR teams. Some are not, like Life, and not really connected with one. But the whole league is defined by USA Rugby now as part of the pathway. What that means is, if you could go play with that team, but then maybe you're not even getting time there, and you say, I want to go, I'm playing with NOLA Academy, but now I want to play with the New Orleans club or Shreveport or something. You can do that because the pathway is not a club. It doesn't stop you from playing for another club. It allows you that opportunity to pop between clubs. But you need time. And so Lawrence is telling players, you graduate this spring, get somewhere, start playing this fall, get more games in, because minutes are very important. And that's going to lead us into the next issue, which is about getting drafted and playing for a Major League Rugby team. The expectation is actually that you're not going to get a lot of time. Let's look at some of these metrics so you can understand what the numbers tell you about your likelihood to become a player on a team and a regular on the team. So let's have a look. First of all, the players drafted in 2020 for the 2021 season, there were 36 players drafted, or there was a supplemental draft, or were signed after going through the draft process. Of those, 2 started more than 10 games. 9 played 10 games or more, which is actually a lot. We'll see that's actually a lot. And nobody played every game for their team. The average player of those 36 were averaging 229 minutes played. And then we took the number 640, which is half a game of every game of the season. So if you're coming on at 40 minutes, how many players topped 640 minutes? And it was 2 players. Those being Connor Mooneyham, who was the number 1 pick, and Andrew Guerra, who was the Rookie of the Year. And cruelly, his career cut short from a very nasty injury. But both of those players were capped. The next year, 47 players went through the system, either being drafted or being signed after going through the draft process. Once again, started 10 or more games. Only 2 played every game. 1 player did that, though, was to Vita Lepetti, and played 10 games or more, only 5. And the average number of minutes went down. The 2 players who played the most minutes, Eric Naposki, the number 1 pick, to Vita Lepetti, became an Eagle. I don't know what comes first here, the chicken or the egg, but you will see that players who get the most minutes end up being capped. Now, does that mean because they are international level players to start with? Probably true. But it also means it really helps if you get minutes in Major League Rugby to be able to be capped. Because Mooneyham, for example, wasn't capped until this year, but he's been in several years, obviously, in Major League Rugby. The next year, same deal. 2 players started 10 or more games out of 39 that went through the process. 2 players played every game, which was pretty impressive, and only 5 played 10 or more, and the average minutes has dropped down now to 126. So less than 2 games worth, really, for everybody. Your 2 players who got the most time, Sam Gala, number 1 pick, and played every game, and was Rookie of the Year, ended up being capped. And then Colin Gross, Army Rugby. Colin actually sent me this t-shirt, so who was a 2nd round pick, but at lock turned out they found out he knew what he was doing, and it would be great to see him capped. I think he's going to be capped sometime soon. I really do. And then finally, this last year's draft group, well, some of the numbers went up. 45 players, 3 started 10 or more games. 1 of them played every game, that would be Rick Rose, and played 10 or more games, 10 of them, that's a record. And the average numbers now went up to 171. Of the players who, looking for players who played 640 minutes or more, 5 of them in that league. And why is that? Anthem. More players now gravitating toward Anthem. This is a program focused on developing American players. American collegiate players go in, they get drafted. Whether they weren't drafted by Anthem, but they were on loan, whatever, they end up playing for Anthem, and that helps the minutes. Playing the most, Rick Rose, the number 1 pick. I think a Rose Gross 2nd row looks pretty good for the future. We haven't seen him capped yet. And then Albert O'Shaughnessy and Junior Goffa, both of those were Anthem players taken on loan. Both of them 2nd round picks. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there are an awful lot of players who play 0 minutes in Major League Rugby. That's our opening for it. Thank you to our sponsors. If you'd like to contribute to Goff Rugby Report, I don't really talk, I don't beg too much about this, but I do want to say that hosting a website is expensive, and it's getting more expensive. And in fact, I've got a new plan to sort of change the website a little bit. It's going to cost me more to host it. And I really, really appreciate it when fans and readers and supporters donate money. You can go to the URL below and donate directly through PayPal. Just, here you go. Alex, like what you do. Bam. Here's a little donation. Every little bit is much, much appreciated. And it really helps in paying for the costs. Travel and hosting and site maintenance are massive expenses for GRR. I want to thank everybody else for that, and all the people who do that. I mean, it's great, the support I get. And we will be back talking about players next time on the Goff Rugby Report 2024 Major League Rugby Draft Specials.